I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you over the screams in the forest. What was that? Oh, just the trees. The trees are always screaming. They're just so tired of being alive. You know how it is. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Local 58 TV. It's me, your host. And tonight's story comes from a viewer who says she wishes she could remember her name. But anyways, here's the story. It all started with an invitation. One of her best friends from high school, Maya, invited her on a trip to the Darkwoods. She'd heard about it through some friends of hers who were into the occult, witches, that sort of thing. When they told her about the Darkwoods, she was immediately intrigued. The Darkwoods had become quite famous in recent years for its supposedly haunted reputation. A small town near it had become the setting for many horror films, and most of the locals were very much aware of this. Many of them even encouraged the rumors to bring in more business. The history of the woods itself dated back to the Salem witch trials, where many innocent people lost their lives. This, combined with the fact that the trees themselves never seemed to die, no matter how old they got, earned the Darkwoods its rather ominous name. A few days after receiving the invitation, she met up with Maya and her two friends, Oliver and Isabella. After a quick introduction to her friends, they all piled into Maya's car and set off towards the forest. The drive took about 2 hours, and during that time, they mostly talked about their plans for once they reached the Darkwoods. "I don't believe any of that ghost stuff," said Isabella. "I mean, sure, there's probably some spirits around, but nothing that'll actually hurt us. I can't wait to see one," replied Oliver. When they arrived at the entrance of the Darkwoods, it was already getting dark outside. The girls had opted to wear black dresses while the boys wore darker clothes with plenty of pockets for flashlights and other items. As soon as they entered the forest, the atmosphere became heavy and silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped blowing. The trees surrounded them on all sides, and their bare branches clawed at the darkening sky. All the while, the four friends walked in silence, only the crunching of dead leaves beneath their feet disturbing the eerie calm. After about half an hour, the trees began to thin out, and in front of them stood a clearing. In the middle of the clearing stood an old oak tree whose branches had grown together to form a natural archway. According to what Maya had read online, this was the heart of the Darkwoods. This was where all the supernatural activity happened. There was also a gallows hanging from the archway formed by the tree's branches. At first, she didn't think much of it until she realized the noose was still there. As they approached the tree, she could feel her heartbeat speeding up. Was this really a good idea? Suddenly, the air grew cold, and she saw the three others tense up beside her. Just then, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, causing the branches of the oak tree to creak ominously. She jumped when a twig snapped nearby. Startled, she turned to see a dark figure darting between the trees. She called out to the others, but her voice caught in her throat. The figure was gone. As the minutes passed, the shadows seemed to grow longer and more menacing. The full weight of their isolation in the heart of the Darkwoods pressed down on them. Then she saw it again, the dark figure moving between the trees. She pointed it out to her friends, and they all agreed it was time to leave. They hurried past the oak tree, not stopping to look back. Her foot caught on something and she stumbled. "Hurry up," she said to herself, scrambling to her feet and following the others. She had no idea how long they'd been walking, but eventually she heard the sound of running water. The stream! It was just ahead of them. Relief washed over her as she knew that the exit of the Darkwoods wasn't far now. She could almost feel the safety of the town surrounding her. And then they heard it. A low, guttural voice seemed to emerge from the trees. "Leave, while you still can." The voice was raspy, as if belonging to someone who hadn't spoken in ages. They all froze, fear gripping their hearts. The voice echoed around them, seeming to mock their terror. "Leave while you still can," it rasped again, closer this time. Terror propelled her forward. She ran, stumbling over roots and rocks without looking back. The sound of her own ragged breathing filled her ears, mingling with the distorted laughter that seemed to follow their every move. She didn't dare slow down, not daring to turn back until she heard the reassuring sound of the exit. Bursting through the trees, she gasped for breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. The familiar sights and sounds of the town rushed in to reassure her. They had made it out, safe at last. Shaking and tearful, she watched as the others emerged from the trees. Her eyes scanned their faces, relief flooding her when she saw the fear had left them as shaken as she was. They had survived the Darkwoods. Over the next few weeks, the experience in the Darkwoods became something they spoke about often. Each time they recounted the tale, the memory of that terrifying night seemed to fade a little. The nightmares that had plagued her lessened in intensity and eventually stopped altogether. The ordeal had been traumatic, but they had made it out together, their friendship forged in the fires of fear. However, there was something that bothered her. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. It was as if some small part of her was missing. She couldn't shake this feeling that something was not right. It was as if a piece of the puzzle was missing. One day, she was going through her photos on her phone and she came across a picture of her and her friends standing in front of the oak tree. She stared at the photo, a chill running down her spine. She knew that tree. It wasn't from the Darkwoods. It was from a local park. She lived in a small town. There were only so many old oak trees. She recognized that tree because she had climbed it with her brother when she was younger. She remembered the rough bark scraping her palms and the exhilarating view of the town from the treetop. But that wasn't possible. How could this be a picture from the Darkwoods when they had never been here before? Why did she have a picture of her and her friends in front of this tree? She looked at the other pictures from that day. All of them were from the park. Why did they go to the park? She had asked them that, but none of them remembered. It was as if they had all decided to go to the park for some reason, but nobody remembered why. Days went by and she found herself constantly thinking about the picture. Why did they take that picture? What was the purpose? It felt like a question that needed an answer, a loose end that had to be tied. She decided to visit the park herself. She wanted to see the tree and maybe, just maybe, jog her memory. As she approached the tree, a sense of familiarity washed over her. It was the same tree from the picture, but there was something different, something she couldn't quite place. Then she noticed it. Carved into the rough bark of the tree was a pentagram. Her heart skipped a beat. She remembered now. It all came rushing back. She remembered the whispers among her friends about the occult, about summoning spirits. She remembered the strange rituals they had performed in the park under the guise of a normal hangout session. She remembered the incantations they'd chanted, their voices echoing strangely in her memory. She remembered the circle they'd drawn, the strange symbols they'd etched inside it. She remembered everything. She had been there, willingly participating in the summoning ritual. The Darkwoods was not their destination that night. It was the location of the ritual itself. She understood now. The Darkwoods was not a place. It was a state of being, a threshold between the worlds that could be opened anywhere. They had opened it in the park. That was why the tree was familiar. That was why she had a picture of them in front of it. That was why, as she stared at the pentagram carved into the tree, she realized with a jolt that the ritual had worked. Something had been summoned that night, some malevolent entity that had used her and her friends as pawns in its game. She looked around frantically, searching for answers. But the tree stood silent, the pentagram mocking her dawning horror. She had participated in this willingly. Now whatever was summoned would be at their mercy. Now, if you've been keeping track, you might have noticed something. Who was telling the story? Not our narrator, right? Our narrator isn't here anymore. See, after that fateful night in the park, our narrator changed. She became withdrawn and distant. Her friends were worried, but there was nothing they could do. They couldn't reach her, and so they went about their lives. Meanwhile, their friend disappeared into the abyss of her own mind, consumed by guilt and fear. She knew what had happened that night, but she didn't know what to do about it. Every time she tried to tell her story, she was met with skepticism, even disbelief. No one believed her story about the Darkwoods, about the summoning. She was seen as troubled, even crazy. Years passed, but her trauma only grew. She became convinced that whatever had been summoned was growing stronger, that it was using her as its anchor to this world. She became obsessed with undoing what she had done, with finding a way to banish whatever it was that she had helped bring into this world. Then one day, she had an epiphany. She would use her story, her trauma, to help others. She would become a storyteller, sharing her tale to warn others about the dangers of the occult, of messing with forces beyond human understanding. And so she did. For years, she traveled the world, sharing her story, warning others about the dangers of the Darkwoods, the entity that dwelled within it. Wherever she went, she carried the burden of her past, the knowledge that she had unleashed something evil into the world. But she also carried with her the hope that by sharing her story, she could prevent others from making the same mistake, for she knew all too well the price one paid for summoning the darkness. Well, that was our story for today. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe and leave a like. And if you want to hear more stories like these, click right here.